Hey, everybody. Welcome to, I can't believe it, episode 15 already. I am so touched and so honored to have today as my guest, Elizabeth Lyons. I don't even know how we really met. All I know is that we somehow found each other online.
Hmm.
We had a conversation. She had a podcast and she just had me on. And it was in my early days of podcasting. So I spoke
Yeah.
so long and so much
No, it's
that,
great.
that we had to have like 17 episodes. No,
Well, we did. We had to have two. You're the only one that I've had to do that with.
she couldn't shut me up somehow. And so I don't get to speak to her as much as I like. I feel so in sync with her. And one of the things that I really like about her is her approach to life, which is she helps people write books, she's amazing at what she does.
Oh, thank you.
And part of what she does is a philosophy that sits behind her philosophy is if you would only be able to touch one person with the book that you wrote, would you still write the book? And believe it or not, that's a crux point for her as to whether she wants to work with somebody. And I can tell you from my own experience in writing The Mosaic, I thought I was going to tell my friends about it. They were going to buy it. They were going to tell 10 of their friends. They were going to buy it. They were going to tell 10 of their friends. And bam, 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 it was going to spread. And it really takes more time than that. I was honored to know that Paulo Coelho, who was one of the best-selling authors with the book called The Alchemist, in his first year only sold 2 copies of his book. So things take time. And so I want to give you a little bit of background, and I want to officially bring Elizabeth in. She's a 5-time author. She's obsessed with, and I mean obsessed. When I say obsessed, she's obsessed with the entrepreneur's backstories and words. She's also obsessed with coffee, but we'll get to that too. She helps entrepreneurs and high performers write, publish, and launch their books so that they can grow their brand and increase their product and their impact. And her book is called Enough. It's available on Amazon. It's available now as an audio also on Amazon. And I think you'll find you can wait till the interview's over to buy it, or you can pause right here and just go to Amazon right now and get it, because you're going to want the book, okay? So it's really an honor to have you, Elizabeth. Welcome, and thank you for being on the Mosaic podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honor to be here.
It's my pleasure. So we're going to start a little bit off key because it's just what I do.
Right.
When you were a kid growing up, what did you think you were going to do?
Oh my gosh, all the things that you're supposed to do. So my first dream, and I still remember actually being, I think, in maybe 2nd grade, and it was almost Halloween. And the question was, what's everyone going to be? And I was going to be a nurse.
Wow.
Because that's what I was going to be in the world, was a nurse. So for a long time, I was going to be a nurse. I was never going to be a teacher, believe it or not. I mean, that just never crossed my mind as something that I wanted to do. I probably saw how incredibly hard it was on my teachers and thought that doesn't seem good. I wanted to be a journalist for a long time. I wanted to be Lisa Ling for a long time.
Wow.
I wanted to be a documentary, kind of go all around the world and into these hidden secret societies and these cultures that we don't hear and know much about, and get to do investigative. I didn't think of it as investigative reporting. I thought of it as storytelling, uncovering these stories that exist.
So when you look at life now, could you ever imagine that you would have done what you're doing now then?
Well, no and yes. No in the storytelling realm.
Yeah.
But not in this capacity.
It's so interesting because when I hear you talk about it, you nurse a project forward.
True.
You go into different cultures through the stories that people bring to you, and you nurture their stories, right? I mean, a lot of the founding things that you wanted to be as a kid, you're doing just in a different shape and form.
That's really interesting because I had never thought of it that way. Nursing is so much about compassion and caring for someone and listening to them and hearing what they're dealing with and treating them as a unique individual instead of as a set of symptoms. I mean, that's how I think of nursing anyway.
Yeah, because I remember when I was a kid, I thought I could be anything in the world. I didn't realize that I had to be just a person. So I had a conversation with myself of, could I be a table, and could I be a chair, and could I be the sky, and could I be a star? And when it came down to it, what I decided I wanted to be was a trash man.
Really?
Because I loved watching the trash truck come, and the guys would stand on the back of the trash truck, and they would go down, pick the cans up, and throw the trash in. They would grind it. And I sat there every Friday when they would come. And finally, I was like 4 years old. And one of the guys said to me, "Do you want to ride the truck with me?" And I thought I died and went to heaven. My mother thought she was going to die because like these strangers were taking her kid on a trash truck and grinding. Yeah. But I was ecstatic with that. And what I realize now in my life, I'm just a different trash man. When I read the story of my trash man in the Mosaic, I take people's trash all the time. That's what I do. So it's interesting to see how we thought we were going to be morphs into really what we are. Sometimes it doesn't.
Right. That is interesting. Yeah.
So what's one thing people are surprised to find out about you?
That I'm as introverted as I am. That it's not as comfortable as it may seem for me to be in front of a lot of people, or, in big rooms full of people and networking. And that was something I really had to work on, was my ability to authentically connect and be comfortable. Not the authentic connection part, but the comfort level part of it.
Yeah. And how did that happen for you? Because how do you take someone who's introverted and suddenly have them feel comfortable in a group of people? Because the way you portray yourself is so easy accessible, and you're kind and friendly and happy and loving and all the nice things.
Thank you for that.
You're very easy to get to know. So do you believe that about yourself?
Which part?
That you're easy to get to know and you're kind? And
I do. And I think it's more, so this is the analogy I give, is when there's a weekend event and there are a bunch of speaking engagements, and it's topic after topic after topic. And then there's a happy hour, and then everyone goes out. When everyone else goes out, I'm going back to my room.
Yeah.
I have to, that's the introverted side of me. I'm giving it all during the day, especially if I'm involved, if I'm presenting, if I'm in any way involved in the event. And then I just have to, bring it down. But I really like the question that you asked about how you get there, because I think that a common piece of advice is, and it's a piece of advice I used to give actually, is just do it, right? Just put yourself in an uncomfortable space until it's no longer uncomfortable. And I do believe that that's part of it, because you have to do that. I think the other half of it is becoming very clear with who you are, becoming very comfortable with who you are, and not trying to portray what you think everybody else in the room wants you to be.
Yeah.
Just be you.
Yeah. And do you find a lot of people who do that, or do you find that's a quality most people don't really understand?
The ability to go into a room and be you.
The ability to just be you and not be what you think other people want you to be.
I think it's very hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of people struggle with it, and I completely understand.
And so how are you doing with that? How are you doing?
Now I'm doing great.
Okay. So
yeah,
I wanted to just ask you, because I thought you were doing great, but I just, so what was the connection piece that changed for you that allowed you to be just you and not what other people wanted you to be you? What's a piece that allowed you to say, you know what, I'm done. I know it's a networking thing, and I know I could meet more people. I know people could get to like me, but I'm done tonight. I've given all that I'm going to give. I want to go home and recharge myself.
Yeah, that's a great question, because for many years I would not do that, because I think, oh, someone's going to be mad at me, or they're going to judge me, or they're going to think I'm standoffish, or they're going to think I'm not social, or I'm going to lose business. I went down this whole list of things. And what I think it ultimately was my willingness to get to know me,
Hmm.
really get to know me. And just, it's this space that you get to where you're not everybody's cup of tea. I'm not everybody's, I'm not for everybody. That's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean that I'm,
Oh no, you're a bad person.
Right. I'm awful. But like, I always go into things with kindness and there's the whole boundary thing. I mean, there's just so many things that come into play that I think what's challenging for people, and what was certainly challenging for me, is trying to work through all those things at the same time. So trying to work through, who am I? What are my boundaries? What do I like to do? What's my favorite color? Yes, I like to talk, but no, I don't like to talk about this type of stuff.
Right.
And you have to be willing to take some time and incrementally address each one of those things until you kind of get over the hump, and you just find yourself going downhill in a good way, more so than you were previously challenged to go uphill.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting, and I wasn't planning to segue this quickly into what you do and who and all of that, but it seems like such a perfect segue, because when people are writing a book, I would imagine a lot of those concerns. I know for me, like I can speak something, but then it's gone.
Right.
I can record it. I can delete it. I can do all that. But when you have a book out, the book isn't gone. The book's there.
Right.
And so who we present ourselves to be, if it's not authentically us,
you better be ready to own it.
You got to be ready to own it. And so in the work that you do, and let's talk, why don't you describe the work that you do before I start asking you about the questions around the work that you do?
Okay.
What do you do? Who do you want? Who comes to you? Why do they come to you?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about what you do.
It's a huge variety of people who come to me, and they all want the same thing, which is they all want to tell their story. Now, there are one thing that they all have in common, and what I find super interesting and fascinating, is that it doesn't matter if you never graduated high school or if you have a double PhD and you're the CEO of your company. People are afraid that their story isn't good enough. Like, what's so special about my story? Will anyone even care? Or am I going to be judged by this? Am I going to say something that's going to hurt somebody or that's going to cause a problem? Or am I just going to put this out in the world and it's going to sit there and it will have been a quote unquote waste of a year or 6 months and however many thousands of dollars to do? The concerns are all the same.
Yeah.
But in the end, what it is people want to be able to own their story. So they're seeking the validation. The challenge is that for me and the work that I do, I want them to self-validate before we even start.
Wow. So is there a process that you take people on to do that, to get them to self-validate? Or do you have, before you accept somebody as a client, do you have them do some work with yourself or somebody to coach them? Or do you just take them on and it's ongoing process that you do it as you go? How has it happened?
It definitely depends. I've gotten to the point, having done this for so long, that I can almost tell where people are when they first come to me. So there will be a group that's just not, we were talking earlier, the first question, and this isn't the first thing I hit people with. I'm not like, hi, Melissa, I'm Elizabeth. Nice to meet you. Let me hit you. That's not it. But it's somewhere in the course of, it's very early on. And the question is, if you only were going to sell one book that was going to impact one person, would you still want to do it? And if the answer is no, then there's no judgment for me. I know that I'm not the right person to work with them, because our expectations and our desires are completely different.
So why is that such an important question for you?
Because in the end, in order for a book, this sounds, and you're going to get this 100%, I think, or maybe 97, given our track record. But in order for a book to really get legs, as I say, and take off, you'd think, and it used to be that you had to say, oh my gosh, everybody's my market, everybody's my reader. I've got millions and millions and millions. And that may be true. But if you're not just talking to one person, the book is very confusing. It's clear that you're trying to talk to different people. You're trying to give different people what they want. etc. So when people's initial, it's almost, it's not an esoteric question. It's a very direct question. However, it's getting at the heart of what they're trying to do. Are you trying to make money, or are you trying to make an impact? Because if you're trying to make an impact, you have a much better chance of making money, believe it or not, than if you're just saying, I'm going to throw this thing together and everybody's talking about it, so I'm going to throw it out into the world and it's going to go somewhere. And the latter leads to not only disappointment, but extreme frustration on the part of the author and myself, because the expectations are just completely misplaced.
Yeah. And there's some people out there that say we're going to publish a book in a weekend and we're going to do this, and the book doesn't have to be good. It can suck because it doesn't really matter. No one's going to read it. It's going to be, you're going to be an expert and you're going to go on stages and you're going to make your money from talking. What would you say to people that are being almost coerced by those people to write a book with them?
Well, I think that I don't want to use the word issue, although I just did. The challenge is not so much, they need to really get in touch with themselves, because if they're doing it with a book, they're doing it with a lot of other things too.
Bam. So huge. Pause. Okay. Say that again, because that's a huge point.
Well, they need to get in touch with themselves, because if they're doing it with a book, they're doing it with a whole bunch of other things too.
Wow.
So they're seeking outside themselves. Whatever the latest and greatest expert, guru, parent, best friend, boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, whatever is saying you should do this, they're going, okay, that's it. That's the magic bullet. I'm going to go do it. And until you take a moment and you really identify why you're doing anything, I don't care if it's a book or like dyeing your hair purple or whatever, if you're not doing it for the right reasons for you, you will come out of the hair salon with purple hair and go, okay, why don't I feel happier? This was supposed to be the magic moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know about the world that you live in, but when I look at the world around me, I don't see a lot of people that know themselves.
No. And I say that with, I just got to know myself within the last 8 years. So,
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So how to those, so do you not, I mean, how do you find clientele then, if it's so important for them to know who they are and they don't know who they are? Because like, even when you said everybody wants to tell their story, I found the hairs on my back going up a little bit, because even though I believe that's true internally, I think people are scared to death to tell their story.
They are.
Okay.
So it's kind of a convoluted thing. They want to tell their story, but part of the reason they want to tell their story is because they believe that they've been through something unique. At the same time, they're looking for validation from the outside that what they've been through is as unique and as, amazing as what they think. They're not 100% strong in their conviction about. So that's where oh my God, but what if, like, I believe I can. I've been on the phone with prospects who in the same sentence will say, or in the same 5 seconds, I believe I can impact 1 million people, but what if nobody reads it?
Wow.
Okay. And so that's where I see that duality playing out.
Yeah.
And so I can tell you don't have to be all the way. I mean, my gosh, I just, wrote a book on being enough and having enough. And there are definitely days when I don't feel like I am or have or anything else. You don't have to be all the way at the end and stay there forever. That, in my opinion, actually makes you unrelatable and unachievable and unattainable, all these things. But you have to be far enough along the path that I can keep walking you along that path as we're going. Because what people aren't often prepared for, and I love it because it happens usually after 3 or 4 weeks of working with someone, is they start to go, Elizabeth, are we sure about this? Some variation of that.
Right.
And then we just have to say, okay, what's going on?
Wow. It's so interesting because even when I was at Hay House and I was the director of business development there, people would come and they would write. For me, I use the analogy of a wheel in those days. There's the rim where most people are at. There's the spokes that take us to the rim. And there's the hub of who we are that goes through those spokes to get to that rim. Most people came and said, I want to write my spoke book. Very few people said, I want to write my hub.
The hub.
Because the hub is a hard book to write. Do you find that to
I
be
can
true?
tell. Mhm. 100%. And not all of my clients are writing a hub book. And we know that.
Yeah.
Those are intense. They're incredible, truly. I mean, I have two clients in my head right now who I'm working with who, I mean, I'm thinking about in my head, it's just beyond an honor to be in this space with them and navigate. But you don't have to be in the hub space to write, and you don't have to write the hub book. What you have to do is know I'm a spoke, or I'm on the rim, like wherever. You have to be honest with yourself and me, but honest with yourself first about where are you on this tire, this metaphorical tire. And based on that, if you're on the rim, don't go into it with the expectation that I, Elizabeth, am going to sell the book like you're at the hub. Does that make sense?
100%.
You know,
100%.
I can't take your book any further than you are your story. You can take it further than anybody.
So let's backtrack and let's sort of go through this process, because the beauty of what you do is you help people who don't know how to write a book. And tell me if I'm wrong. You help
You're right.
people. You help people who don't know how to write a book, don't know how to conceptualize it, put the storyline together, build the chapter, build the characters, and you help them write that story. What should someone expect when they come to you to write? Because here you were just saying, if you're on the rim and you're writing the rim book, if you expect me to take you to the hub, it's probably not going to happen. But I bet there are times, because I know you a little bit, and I don't know you through our conversation as much as I know you through our heart connection.
Right.
I know there are times where you've taken somebody from the rim to the hub and brought out the hub book in them.
Yes, but they have to be willing and open and ready to go to the hub. Right.
What does that mean? What for someone listening right now who says, "But I am willing and ready," and
I mean, you either are or you aren't, and it shows up through the action of it, right? So it's a willingness to be vulnerable. It does not mean, people ask me, well, do I have to share my deepest, darkest, most trapped? No, not necessarily, right? But you have to be willing to put it all out on the table with me. So I'm a vault. If I were working with you, anyone else, like, right, and you told me something and you said, Elizabeth, wait, I just changed my mind. I don't want that story in the book. I don't want it to, it dies with me. Like I'm a vault. But if you can't even open up to me about the story, and I can tell that I read what people have written up to this point. So in most cases, people have written something. Most of my clients are people who have been thinking about writing a book for 10 plus years.
Wow.
And so they've got something. Like maybe it's a journal activity or something that they've written in. And I can look at it and I can tell how surface level it is. Okay. So I can see if they're willing to go deeper than that.
And so I guess what I want to say is, then what makes a good book? Because can you have a rim book that is a good book?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Depending
Talk about that.
Okay. So depending on what your intention is. So a lot of my clients are entrepreneurs, and we talk about two different types of books, nonfiction and memoir. And the reason that I talk about memoirs, because memoir, even though men do not like the word in my experience, because it makes them think that it's got to be all like, I don't know, people are going to cry or whatever, which is fine. Right. But when it's business only, the intention of that is to advance someone else's business. So this is for the person who goes to the bookstore, goes to Amazon and says, I want to learn how to create a 10-step funnel. Just tell me that. I don't really want to know anything about your story. I don't really care where you came from. If you know how to build a funnel, just tell me, do this, 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 and this, and do it. To me, that's a rim book.
Yeah.
And those sell, those work, because there are readers who just want the periphery, right? I thrive in the hub. This is going to become a new thing. Now we're going to have like a graphic with the hub,
Right.
So I can only work on so many rim books at a time. And I also can only work on so many hub books at a time. I can't work on more than two. I won't work on more than two, I guess I should say, because they're so, deep, and they're drawing out so much, and they're emotionally, I don't want to say draining or exhausting. They're points of growth. both for the author and for me. And so I like to have a good mix, but you can absolutely write a good rim book. Just be very clear about the fact that you're writing a rim book, and be very clear about the fact that your rim book is not going to get you on the proverbial Oprah. Like, it's, you know, that's where we have a challenge, is when people say, well, I just want to write a quick 15,000 word book. And I don't do books less than 40,000 words. But if someone says, I just want to write a quick 25,000 word book on how to plant an organic garden, just very step by step. I mean, that's okay, but that's not going to get you on Good Morning. But then if you say to me, and I want it to get me on Good Morning America,
right,
then we have to have a conversation.
Right. And so we're talking about them as if they are very disconnected pieces. There's the hub and there's the rim and there's the, but is a book a disconnected piece, or is it more of an integrated piece, where a really good book that has the possibility to make people talk about it, does it integrate all of those things, the hub, the spokes, and the wheel?
I believe that it does. So I believe, okay, so I believe it's there's the what, right? So what is it that you want to talk about? And then there's the why, and then there's the how. Like, how do you know this? How do you, and the hub is to me, it's the heart, literally, of the book. It's the point at which someone says, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. And I know it's cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. I thought I was the only one who had ever felt that way, or feared that, or experienced that, or was worried about that. Or I thought I was so dumb or silly to be worried about that. And so now you have that. Now it's like the author's heart is out, and now the reader's heart can come out. And that's where the magic happens, because that's where both grow. That's where the reader grows. That's where the real impact and transformation happens. So yes, you can impact someone's business by just saying, do these things and build a funnel and yada, yada, for sure.
Yeah. So there's a big trend now, especially currently, around storytelling and the power of storytelling, and how much more powerful a story is than just information. And so what do you say to people who want to say, this is the way to build a funnel and we're going to give you these 10 steps? Do you try and invite them into the process of having a story told? Or do you try and say, oh no, okay, you can just write the 10 steps without sort of storytelling at all?
It depends where they are. It is not my practice to try to talk anybody into or out of anything. I'm not a licensed therapist, except, as I like to say, except through Google. And so I don't want, certainly, to take somebody down a path that they're not ready to go down emotionally.
Huge point, by the way. Huge point for people to understand, because there's so many, myself would be the opposite of that. I would find my joy in taking people away and disrupting where people are and bringing them to a place so that their book, in my mind, would be a deeper, more full.
Well, I would love to do that.
But
right?
what I'm saying is, for you to be able to know what your place is in that.
That's
for people to be able to come to you and say, this is all I'm willing to do, will you help me do this, is really a beautiful quality.
Well, no, thank you. I mean, I think that comes from me taking the time to get to know me. Yeah. Because in full transparency, there was likely a time years ago when someone could have said, I want to write a book about bike wheels. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great. And all the spokes are going to represent all the different ages of your life. And it's going to be on Good Morning America. And it's going to be incredible. I'm not saying I would have said that exactly. I'm just saying I wasn't. Now I can really look and say, why are you writing the book for you? Why are you writing the book for someone else? What do you need it to do? What do you need it to do for you? So,
and so when you ask those questions, what are some of the responses you get, and what are some of the responses you know that will happen that will not work and work?
So the response that will not work is, this is going to launch my fill in the blank, like immediately.
Right.
You know, one of my least favorite phrases right now is, and has been for a while, is a book is the new business card. No, it's not. You know, another one of my least favorite is nobody reads anymore. Completely not true. There is a subset of people who like, so when people say, I want to sell, and they give me a random number, I want to sell 500,000 copies. And I say, okay, how big is your current, email list or platform? Well, 100.
Right.
Then I try not, I don't want to put, back people into a corner, but it's like, so how are you planning to get from here to here? If there's a plan, me, I'm all about the how. If there's an executable plan, I will come on board with that. Yeah. But if it's kind of like, well, just word of mouth, it's just going to spread word of mouth. No, it's not.
And so why do you think we have that belief? Because even the way I started out with you, I said, I thought I was going to say that, give it to my friends. They were going to like it. They were going to have their friends buy. They were going to tell their friends. They were going to tell their friends. They were going to tell their friends. And then New York Times bestseller, right?
Yes, because that is the dream.
Yeah.
It actually allows you to acquire the dream with the least amount of effort and vulnerability, because you don't have to put yourself out there. You don't have to try to sell. You don't have to talk about it. Other people are selling for you. I would love that too.
Right.
And does it ever happen? 100%. I mean, that's the whole virality concept. To bank on it, however, and to say, well, as a strategy, no.
So people could publish their book with the hope that that's going to happen, if they understand that's the hope that it's going to happen, and that's the dream, that there's going to be a grace and it's going to take off. Mm-hmm. But what percentage of books that are published?
You tell me. You'd know better than I would. I mean,
not many.
It's got to be less than 1%.
Right. I remember when I was at Hay House, there was something like 600,000 books published a year before it was self-help, but before self-publishing happened.
Correct.
And only 300 of them sold 50,000 copies or more.
Well, the last statistic I heard was over 1 million books are published every year. Over half of them are self-published, and most don't sell more than 100 copies.
Wow.
To friends and family.
Wow.
And I look, I use that point, Danny, as a reality check for people, but I don't want it to dissuade people either. I think there's a balance that we have to strike, or that I have to strike with people, in terms of, I want you to understand, I don't want to blow smoke in terms of you're going to make millions off of this. Maybe, I hope you do, but I want you to when you do things for the right reasons, things follow the right path. Right.
So where is the world at with publishing, with book publishing? Because now, in a world where over 1 million books are being published a year, half of which are being published, self-published. Right. How do people stand out? I mean, we live in a noisy world. How do people stand out and ever hope to get recognized?
This is it, but it could be a book, it could be a service, it could be a product, it could be anything. It doesn't matter. We're all fighting the same battle, which is trying to be seen as the needle in the massive haystack. And so the first thing is you start with an actual book. And by that, I mean, it's not a pamphlet. Like, don't write a 15,000 word thing and tell me you wrote a book, because you didn't. You wrote a pamphlet. So advertise it as a pamphlet, and your audience is going to be like, wow, what great value. This free pamphlet is huge. This is so much information for free, or 99 cents, or whatever the case is. But if you go out and say, I wrote a book, and it's not a book, and it's not formatted, and you designed now you are allowed to design your own cover, my friend, but you're the only one. And you designed your own cover on, I don't know what, something that's free.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first step is put as much effort and energy into your book as you would put into anything else you were going to release into the world. I don't understand. It's hard enough to get something to go when it is of high quality. Right. So to think that you can just whip something, if you could just whip something together and throw it out there and it would go, we'd all be, right? We'd all be billionaires. So
well, it's probably the reason why there are 1 million books being published, because people think that they can do that, and that's what's happening. But that's not what's happening anymore. So to those people who are thinking about writing a book, and then as I know you want to be as boosting and helpful to people as you possibly can, and not discourage them, but encourage them to do that and tell their story. But if so many of those books are going to sell under 100 copies, first of all, why write it? Second of all, why sell it? Why not just give it away? Why? I mean, nobody's going to make any money from 100 copies.
Right. The
So
answer to that is, well, some people might though, because it depends. Like I have a client who has sold less than 100 copies of his book, but he got a 7-figure offer from someone in the industry, and his was a rim book.
yeah,
So, those sorts of things happen. But the reason you've asked the exact correct question, why you write it is because you want to find that one person who you can impact through your
yeah,
unique. None of us is the same as another,
yeah,
or one of us wouldn't be here, right?
yeah,
We're all unique. And so everyone has a different perspective. I believe that throughout the world, all of our challenges and problems are really pretty much the same.
yeah,
Fears are the same, challenges are the same. They manifest differently, but they're the same. What's unique is that everyone has a different approach for getting through them, for getting past them, for solving them, for gaining insight. An analogy I use might not resonate with you, but an analogy that, Jen Sincero or Ian Levin-The, that would resonate with you, right?
yes.
So that's why you do it. You can't not do it. You
Yeah.
can't keep it in here anymore.
So would you say, and I'm talking from my own experience, I didn't want to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
It was as if I couldn't not write the book.
Right.
And so it wasn't, even though, and then I had these visions of grandeur, and I've been in the industry for a long time.
Right. Which I
Right?
love.
Which is, I still said, okay, well, this is going to be this. And Paulo
Mm-hmm.
Coelho only sold 2 copies of his book. And so don't be discouraged. And I'm still not discouraged. I still do believe that the book will touch millions of people. And it may not happen in my lifetime. And that's okay. And it may not happen at all. But when you feel driven, it's almost like you have this, for me, I had this compelling thing that kept me up at night. And I couldn't go to sleep because I had to write these words. And I would write the words. I'm interested because my story is so interesting to me, and I always think I'm the only one. I wrote the book several times.
Yeah.
And it was erased by the book several times. It wasn't what it wanted me to say. And the more I fought that, the more I would write and it would be not good, or I would lose it, or somehow I would read it the next morning and it just sucked.
Mm-hmm.
When I finally put myself aside and I asked the characters in my book, what are you trying to say? Like, you're not letting me write what I think you want to say.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, why don't you tell me what you want to say? Then it was almost, I don't want to say it was automatic writing because it still took time and energy to get it correct. But the flow of it was so effortless compared to the effort of 2.5 years of trying to write what I wanted them to say against their will. Do you find that to be the case in the books that you write with people? I guess
I do. Yes, I find a similar resistance that comes up because once we get to around the halfway, it's usually somewhere between the 40 and 50% mark in terms of just working together, a word count or whatever it is. Especially when we're writing hub books or even like spoke books that are close to the hub, the author will have an epiphany of her own or his own. And then what happens is they will almost always think, oh my gosh, I shouldn't do this because I clearly don't have everything figured out.
Yeah.
And so what I like to encourage is this is the beauty, is that this is how you're meant to figure this out so that you can then put it out for other people.
Yeah. And there always is the option of writing a second book, right? I mean, people.
Oh my gosh, right?
But authors do write more than one book, right?
Occasionally they do, right? I've said to so many people, can you only write one book? Did someone tell you that you are only allowed, because they're trying to cram everything in the kitchen sink in here. And it's like, they're trying to talk about gardening and business and parenting and all these things. And I'm like, wait, hang on a second,
Yeah.
And so we have to kind of back that all up.
Let's circle back to something you said, because I think it's a big point in whether you're a business person, a coach, a writer, whatever it is. And it's this whole idea of speaking to your niche, speaking to one person, sort of talking, because everybody wants their book to appeal to a wide audience or to do whatever they're going to do. how do you work with people to narrow down the market that they're speaking to so that they can actually expand the market through that narrow? It's almost like the opposite, right? It's almost like if you write for.
No, it totally is. People have a real resistance to that concept, and I certainly did as well. So I get it. And again, it's whether you're doing a book or a product. It doesn't matter what you're selling, right? There's this notion of who's your avatar, who are you selling to, and the branding people will have you write, even if it's a fictitious person. Like, do they have a mustache? Do they drink beer? What magazines do they? Because you're really trying to get into their head. And the thing that I have found is that people are resistant to that because they fear that it's the fear of missing out on readers.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my gosh, if I narrow myself to here, then I push away these billions of readers. The thing that we have to keep in mind is that if you narrow yourself to 20,000 people, which is extremely narrow. I mean, more narrow than my clients' stuff. If you just that, and you nailed it, and you sold 20,000 books, is that once you start thinking of it that way, that's so much better, obviously, than thinking in terms of 7.6 billion and then failing to capture 10.
Yeah.
Because if you can't figure out who you're talking to, the market has no idea who you're talking to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really important.
So a good dose of reality helps to create a good dose of reality.
Yes.
In some ways, right? Because when you realize that when you write for a billion people or 7 billion people, you're going to probably sell under 100 copies.
Yes.
But if you write to 20,000 copies, you have the possibility to sell to 20,000 people. You have this possibility to sell to 20,000 people. That's 20,000 times more than.
Well, and each of those people knows people. I mean, it's just like I have a client, Holly Jayarmati. She just released her book, The Mother of All Makeovers. And there was so much hoopla before this thing came out. She's pretty well connected and she's a designer in her network. So everyone was really excited. She messaged me last week and she said, okay, we're stalled now.
Right.
Which we knew was going to happen because she did this initial push and she sold a lot of books to friends, family, network, friends of friends, friends of family, the whole thing. Then you stall. Now, this is where the majority of people go, oh, great, we're done. Nobody cares. Nobody's buying it. Nobody's talking about it. She's brilliant. And it's not that she's brilliant. It's not that she has something that everybody else doesn't have. She believes in this book so much.
Yeah.
That she is willing to do, okay, now we got to reach. So if you think about it, like that's the hub. She's like, we've got to reach the spokes now. And then we got to reach the tire. And then we got to reach so you have to love that.
So one of the things I found, and maybe this is what you're saying now, is a lot of people think when they write the book, the work is over.
Oh my Lord. Right.
Right. But so talk to me. Well, probably 1 in a billion times it can be, right?
I mean, it can be if all you want to do is say, I wrote a book.
Right.
If that's the goal.
Right. So what should people expect when they write a book? Because I don't think people get the real picture. And part of what we want to do is have people get a chance to hear what the process is really like so that they can make an educated decision of how they do what they're going to do.
The process is, it's intense. And I don't hesitate to say that, but I know that when I do say it turns off a large segment of the population. But it's like saying,
I love that you hesitated to say it, that I don't hesitate to say it. Because who wants to say that, right? That is not your best sell.
That's not the popular answer, okay? That's not the selling answer, right? If I went out and I said, hey, look, you can hire somebody and you can do it in a weekend, you can whip this thing out, just design your cover here and format it there and blah, 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 they do it. But it just causes problems down the road. Then everybody's yelling at you or whoever, not me, but whoever told them to do that. So I think I often liken it to the restaurant industry. You have young people who want to own a restaurant or who want to run or start or whatever. The statistics on restaurants is that 95% of them will fail. I don't know if it's in the first year, the first 5 years, but 95% of them will fail. If you look at it that way, what it comes down to is, are you the person who thinks, well, I'm not going to do this because 95% of them fail? Or are you the person who says, but 5% are going to succeed? So how do I get in that 5?
Yeah.
And that's who I work with.
I love when a conversation comes full circle, because when we asked initially and we spoke, and even in the way I introduced you, I said that it's so important for you to know that a lot of the crux of your conversation is, if you only sold one book, would you still write the book?
Yeah.
And it's starting to become very clear to me now, and probably people listening, why that's such an important question, because it wouldn't seem like an important question going in. No, I don't want to sell one book. I want to sell a lot of books. I want to write, I'm investing a lot of my time and energy.
Yeah.
But if your answer to that question is true, and if your answer to that question is yes, then it really doesn't matter how many copies sell.
Well, and what was interesting is I asked that question to someone the other day, and her response instinctively was, it's kind of like when I asked people before Enough came out, I said, what is your definition of enough? And I didn't know what I was expecting, but what I got back was a lot of, I've had it, I'm done. It wasn't the positive version of enough.
Right.
It was the negative version, right? So when I asked her, okay, if you could only sell the one book to the one person and make an impact, would you? And her response was, well, no, because that means everybody would think I was a loser.
Wow.
And so I said, wait a minute, we have to take that I'm not asking, nobody knows, take that out of the equation entirely.
Right.
And then she said, oh, so if only I know that I sold one book and it impacted one person, would that be, pun intended, enough? And I said, right. She said, absolutely.
Wow.
But,
but I love her response, because part of what it shows is we're a world driven by the opinions of others rather than by our opinion of ourselves. And so we always want to do what we want to do to look good in the face of others. And yet, what if we don't? Do we still have to look, we still have to look at ourselves in the mirror, and what do we see?
And that's the hardest thing for people to do. I truly believe that is, I don't know if I want to stand on record or saying it's the hardest, but it's absolutely one of the hardest things for human beings to do.
Yeah.
To be willing to really look in the mirror.
Wow. And so talk to me a little bit about your book, about Enough, because I think that Enough is such an important contribution.
Thank you.
To the world. Talk to me a little bit about what your hope was in writing it, what you hope people will get in reading it. Because I think it goes hand in hand with the work that you're doing also in some way.
Well, thank you for that. First of all, that's very kind. For me, having been an entrepreneur for so long, and I'm very goal driven, I'm very laser focused on what I'm doing. And I find that I accomplish one thing and then it's just off to the next and off to the next. And a lot of the people in my group are the same way, my peers and my colleagues and et cetera. And I finally, I had a moment, which I talk about in Enough, in Lululemon, of course, where, it was enough yoga pants, enough. When is it enough?
Yeah.
And I recognize that we all really need to be more cognizant of the fact that we are and we have enough just right now in this present moment where you're breathing. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever surrounds you, you're enough. You're enough, and you'll grow from here. And the book is really a roadmap to identifying and celebrating the enough that you already have and are, but also how to keep moving forward with that same mentality and get to the next level without feeling like a hamster on the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah. Which so many people feel like, right?
Yeah.
So obviously the book's available through Amazon. It's available in they can go into any bookstore and order it in any bookstore. It may not be on the shelf, but they can get it from any bookstore, right?
Yep.
What's one thing you thought you knew and now looking back, realize you didn't really know it at all, or that what you knew was not right? It's totally different than what you thought it was.
Business or personal?
Either way, both
Hmm.
and or.
Hmm. I thought I thought I really knew what the path looked like, both personally and professionally. I mean, I really thought I knew what step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 was, and I did not know who I was.
Hmm.
And so I was taking step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 for someone else entirely.
Wow. Wow. Well, and it's such a beautiful statement, because I know in a lot of the work that I'll do, if people aren't willing to look at where they are, it's like saying, I want you to get me to Florida from California, but we don't know if you're in Northern California or Southern California, right?
That's it.
And the first
That's
steps
it.
that you take from Southern California are completely different than the first steps you take from Northern California. In the middle, it's probably going to get to the same road somewhere along the line. But
And you know what other people do is they won't admit that they're in Florida to begin with, to start.
yes, yes, yeah. So what would you say to people who sort of want to do that? They want to really learn to be themselves,
Mm-hmm.
but they just they don't know how. They don't have the courage. They don't know what to do. Where would the starting point for them be? What would you?
Well, they do know how, and
Okay.
they do know who they are. And the starting point, I think, is I ask people a lot, if I think about all these influencers who are posting with the Maseratis, right, as an
Right.
example, or the
Right.
jets. And I think if nobody ever saw that picture, would you pose there? Would you buy that car? And if the answer is yes, then that gives you an inkling into who you are and why do you like that car and what's it about? Because I can almost guarantee it's not about the price tag.
Yeah.
So if we remove those things, and it's just starting to look at things differently. Why do I like this?
Yeah.
Why don't I like this?
Yeah.
And looking at where people feel lit up versus where they feel drained.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think it's so hard for people to be themselves?
Because they're afraid they're not enough.
Wow. And is that what your book talks about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for anybody who even thinks remotely that they might not be enough, this is a must-have book for you to get. And if you
Thank
didn't
you.
pause at the beginning of our podcast, I want you to make sure you pause now and take the time to go there and get it, because I think one of the biggest epidemics around the world today is that we don't feel like we're good enough. We don't feel like we're enough. We don't feel like what we have is. I talk about it in the Mosaic as everybody's trying to be extraordinary, but we're really okay just being ordinary, and it's extraordinaries that make extraordinary things happen, right?
And
So,
you're never going to be enough for the wrong people, the wrong job, the wrong house, the wrong car. I mean, that's been said a million times too.
yeah,
That's why it all starts here in
yeah,
you.
yeah. There's a great saying they say, if you look at an elephant and think it should climb a tree like a monkey, it'll never be successful, right?
Yes. Or
So
if you look at a fish and say that it should be able to climb a tree, it'll live its life believing that it's stupid.
yeah, exactly. That
Right.
might be the actual quote. I don't know.
Yeah.
I probably messed
I
it up.
like the elephant and the monkey one too, though. That's good. It's the exact
So
same concept.
so if there was one thing out of all the things out, I mean, writing a book is almost like being a therapist. I know you say you don't want to be a therapist, but
I get right.
it's really like taking people's fears, if there was one thing you would see in all the fears and the things that you've worked people through and the things that have happened and the results of what they felt when they wrote a book, and you would boil it down to one tip that you would give to people, simple, that would move them past their fear of not doing something, what would that be?
I think, one of my favorite sayings is be still.
Beautiful.
And I think it would be that, because when you're still, you can believe. Be still and believe.
Wow. Fabulous. Last question, and then I want to take time to make sure we get your website and all that stuff out.
Okay.
And it has a follow-up question, so I shouldn't really say it's a last.
Okay.
We're a different world than we've ever been right now, and some of that is in beautiful ways. I mean, we're doing much more for each other than we've ever done before in the world. We're more connected than we've ever been. But even with all that, there's so much disagreement and so much conflict and stuff. And I just wonder, when you look at the world today, is this the world that you always hoped you would hand down to your children and to your grandchildren?
Wow. I mean, yes and no. You know, I think I feel incredibly blessed to live in this country.
Yeah.
I feel incredibly blessed and grateful to have the opportunities that I have. My youngest daughter was adopted from Ethiopia, so I'm well aware, and she, even at 11, is well aware of the differences in her opportunities here versus there. I think I've never really thought of it in terms of, oh, this was easy for us or hard for us, and it's easy for them or hard for them. I just wish everybody could feel as connected as they desire to feel.
Wow. Beautiful. And so if there were one thing that you would say to people to help them feel as connected as they desire to feel.
Mm-hmm. Oh, be yourself, be you.
Be you.
Be you, and own it all day.
So just connect to yourself, really. It's not about, be yourself.
100%.
Fabulous.
Yep.
Let's talk about your website, how people can get this incredible book enough, and how people can get to work with you if they want to. So how do people get in touch with you? What's the best way to do that?
The best way is my website, simply because which is elizabethlyons.com. It has all my social media on there. The social media platform on which I'm most active is Facebook.
Okay.
Facebook and Instagram are my two.
And so we'll post that down below in the show notes when we post it. I want to just take a moment and thank you, and then a moment to just put a summary together, and then we're going to exit stage left. But I just want to thank you for, in the busyness of all that you're doing, to just
my pleasure,
to honor me with being on the show. You're someone I look up to. You're someone I would advise people to come to. You're someone, if people want to write a book, I would say run, don't walk.
Thank you.
But if you have to crawl to get there.
Absolutely.
You heard the process. You heard what's involved. It's not just about someone editing words or correcting spelling. It's about taking you on this journey that takes you to where you want to go. Mm-hmm. What I heard in this episode, and what I really liked about it, the surprise for me, which wasn't really that big of a surprise, is that everything we do is like everything else that we do. The way we do anything is the way we do everything. And what we see in the process of writing a book is that who we are comes to the surface.
Yes.
And we have to be careful. We have to be willing to look at who we are. And if we want to just stay on the periphery, if we're someone on the periphery and we're willing to write a periphery book, then we won't have any problem. But if we are expecting to be a periphery person to go to the core, to go to the hub of that, then the journey is going to be a more intense journey, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Right? And so what I love is that the world is set up to allow us to get to know ourselves better. And in all the work that you've done, the one thing that you boiled everything down to is just be yourself. Yeah. And in a world where we're in so much conflict and we're in so much disagreement, and we're so much telling everybody how they should be, I think we've forgotten that simple thing of, if we just be ourselves and let other people be themselves, the world might be a different place for us to live in.
Absolutely. If we stop arguing over what's right and what's wrong and just know what's right for me and what's, I think things would be wildly different.
So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us for this episode. I hope that you will crawl, run, walk, fly, do whatever you have to do to get in touch with Elizabeth. I know you will not be sorry that you did. I hope you'll go out and get her book Enough, because you will find, like I found, that it wasn't enough. I just wanted to keep reading it more and more and more.
Thank you.
Her charming way translates through everything she does because it's her. And so until next time, I say thank you, and I look forward to seeing you again on our next episode. Ciao, everybody.